All right, folks, I'm going to try and see if this is actually working this time because after what happened last week, I want to make sure I'm actually broadcasting where I'm supposed to go before I bust into anything because I wasted 15 minutes last week uh, not realizing that I couldn't just trust the tool I was using, right? Um, so, yeah, I can just now see that it is working. I'm happy. Audio appears to be working just fine. Chat is here. I love this. Okay. Do, 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 do. Okay, so I see Mr. Billy Wifta, who was here 10 minutes early, which is great. Bjorn Jorgensen, who's got me up on the big screen at work. Ian, Mudhorn Station, thank you. And Bill says, I hear you and now I see you. Very good. Everything's working. Awesome. This is good to go. So happy Monday, guys. Um, Really glad it's working this time. I don't know what happened last week, but I know that whatever worked this week is working. So we're going to use this as a template moving forward. So thank you. Thank you for being here. Badger is also in the house. Nice to see you. Just to prove comments are also working here. Badger says that he's commuting home soon. Wanted to say hi. Hi. So, but yeah, everything's working. As Bill says, we're 5 by 5. I'm going to do some housekeeping, some light housekeeping, um, and then we'll just get right into the topic at hand for today's show. Um, so, Snake Lair, although this is not Snake Lair HQ or anything like that, it is at 3116 right before I hit live. And I am one of those people. I did that this morning. I was actually kind of stoked to do that. Not just because I want this thing to back and I want one, but also because it's the first official thing that we're getting shipped to Oregon as far as like I ordered something. Royal One, welcome to the stream. Hi. Um, but so that's going, and that means that we're just over halfway with 2 days left before the early bird goes away. And I think most people uh, will assume that if it doesn't, once the early bird passes, it's not going to fund if it hasn't funded by then. And unless some major change is made, I am concerned about that for I think are obvious reasons. But since this morning, which when it did hit 3,000, it's had over 100 backers just in the last couple of hours. So it's going pretty steady. So I'm curious to see where that's going to end up. Honestly, I think some of that and what we're going to see is a light surge as we approach the 14th, not just because we're approaching the 14th, but also because some people who have a twice monthly pay period, they're getting their direct deposits early from the 15th. So, like, my old job would pay me on the last day of the month and the 15th, and my direct deposit was usually hitting the 12th. So, those people that have similar types of pay, um, they might be backing this or whatever. So I don't know how all this works. I don't have a crystal ball, but every single thing I can think of and account for is taking place in a certain way. Bjorn says that the gunship over at HasLab is holding steady, which is I look at that much in the same way a lot of Motu fans are looking at the Snake Lair, where it's like you're charging too much for too little. And although I think that's true for Snake Lair, I'm willing to pay the extra 30% because I really want that thing. Now, what I have been seeing over and over and over, and a bit more focus on the feedback since basically this weekend has just been, hey, lower the price and or include everything for everybody throughout the entire thing. So like drop the early backer portion of Lady Slither's skeleton, give us the Pythonus priest, just give it, basically eliminate the way crowdfunding works, generally speaking, or lower the price or both, and you'll see more people backing it again. So I hope that they make people happy, and I hope that it just funds like nuts. But we don't know. And I'm not going to speculate any further on that. I just want to check in with it and say, hey, that's where it's at. So, Bing Long is here. Nice to see you back. Says, dude, can finally make it again live, color, and stereo sound. Well, I'm glad that you're here, and I'm glad you're here live. Good to see you. Evan Badger says, classified HasLab is not doing hot. It funded but hasn't moved since. 8,700 out of 14,000 for all stretch goals. 3 days left. Yeah, that's not looking good. I think the Snowcat was doomed from the start. I think it was the wrong vehicle at the wrong time to begin with. And I think for the price, the value proposition wasn't quite what people were expecting. I felt the Dragonfly was a little bit too expensive, but given it was a HasLab, given that the size of the Dragonfly at the time relative to other offerings that we've seen, it was like, you know what? This is about as in the pocket price-wise as you're going to get. And they apparently haven't learned from that. And a lot of people I've seen predicting as far as private conversations where I think you're going to see on that last day a lot of people canceling their order when they realize they can't get all of the stretch goals, which is what they want. It's a whole thing. Bill's like, I came to watch your old ass show, The Cloud. Come on, man. Patience, man. Jesus Christ. Patience. You got to pace yourself. Everybody says, dear YouTube, I gave Bill permission to say ass without needing me to approve. I gave him permission too, especially given that YouTube recently said that you don't have to curtail your swearing early in a video anymore. It won't affect your monetization. So fuckity fuck. Now we can just do that with impunity now. So on to the meat and potatoes of today's show. The title is fairly convoluted. Moving the needle of nostalgia, and the humility of middle age, right? Yeah, your boy likes to sound a little dramatic from time to time. Like, I get that, right? Essentially, this is going to be something that, depending on what videos of mine you've seen and other live streams, some of these points are going to sound repetitive if you know me pretty well. And I apologize for that, but I want to contextualize it a little bit differently. Pixel Dan put out a video about toy collaborations recently. And, he's feeling some fatigue from that. And, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but the vibe that he was giving off and some of the things that he said were like, it's one thing to collaborate when there's something really cool to deliver. It's another thing to collaborate when you're just bashing two very nostalgic properties together and seeing if it sticks to the wall. And I agree with him. I agree with him 100%. I think that there are some interesting and creative things that can come out of these mashups, these collabs. But when they are otherwise stifling the creativity within the existing toy lines they have, by that I mean you're spending the money on tooling certain things up and you're just putting stuff out under a different banner to try and either delay something, or I don't know what the other motive would be except to draw in people. Like, for example, I think the Motu Ninja Turtle collab, the thought would be that, well, hopefully people that buy turtles but don't buy Motu would at least buy these. And, same thing for like Transformers and stuff like that. And I don't necessarily see any evidence that that's happening. So the corporate pitch of this will make us more money, I just don't think that works. I don't think that holds any water, frankly. Which is a shame because, like, if this were a creative idea, I would love to be proven wrong, but I don't think that any of these really are. The only reason, for example, that I got any of the turtle crossover stuff, I got a shredder. so he could be a shredder. So I can have a shredder that poses. That's it. If I end up getting this 5-pack that Playmates is putting out that has a posable shredder, I'll probably take the head off of the crossover shredder that I have, put a spare head from some other Motu guy on there, make him some kind of a custom warrior thing. I don't know. But it's just kind of like, you know, it's a little bankrupt to me. There are some cool looking figures that came out of that I did not buy, because as cool looking as they weren't cool looking enough for my taste, right? And they don't really fit in the lore. It's a whole thing, and like Bill here is saying, Transformers and Motu doesn't make any sense to cross over at all. I agree. I don't think there's anything there. I'll come back to this. Oh, Badger says Ninja Turtle Motu collab. I sleep, but TMNT Godzilla collab. Yes, they look cool. I don't see myself buying them. I think that if you're going to do that, you've got to do something a little bit different. For example, Playmates just reissued the giant turtles that are about yo tall a year or 2 years ago, and made them really hard to get. Actually, I would have bought all 4 of the turtles in that size if I had the chance, at retail price, mind you, $20 a pop. Would have loved it. Would still love them. But in a world where those exist, and you're doing a Godzilla collab, why not just make them big kaiju-sized things? You're already making these big toys for the Godzilla stuff. Come on. I mean, the idea takes care of itself right there. But no, we're getting 5.5-inch to 6-inch figures of turtles looking like Godzilla characters. I understand that is the tradition of all the crossover turtles that have come before, because this isn't a new thing. This came from the 90s and stuff like that. And that's the excuse a lot of people are going to use. But if you're doing something brand new and you have the means, just take a risk, do something cool. But they're not doing that. And I think that's a waste. It's a waste of tooling. It's a waste of money, both marketing, manufacturing, everything. World Made of Cardboard, welcome to the show, says, these collaborations are the result of the investment firms Vanguard and BlackRock owning the toy companies now. It's all brands to them. I agree. I agree. The people that are ultimately in charge of the companies that make the toys don't care about the toys. They care about the brands. How can we make money off of the brands? Yeah, that's what it comes down to. When you're a publicly traded company, you look at your assets very differently than you would if it was a privately owned company. Privately owned companies tend to really protect their assets and the integrity of their company and their reputation. And publicly traded companies, that doesn't seem as important as just making money and pleasing the shareholders. I don't understand. Well, that's not true. I understand why that happens. I don't like it. That's all. I just don't like it. So, yeah, it's a 6-pack. Thanks for catching me on that. Nolan is here. Hi, yourself. And Badger has a good point here. He says, when you own Micro Machines, all 5-inch turtles can be kaiju. Kaiju is spelled with an A. But that's okay. That's okay. World Made of Cardboard following up says, Hasbro and Mattel collaboration, just one guy in a suit yelling down the hall to another, hey, you got Hot Wheels? Let's do Transformers. Yay. Yeah, it is kind of what it sounds like. When I think the obvious crossover with Motu and Transformers was make Motu scale vehicles that transform into robots. I mean, come on. But no one talks about that. Also, you put out a Skeletor Megatron combination, and we don't get an Optimus Prime He-Man combination as the companion figure. Make those the must buys, so you're guaranteed that money. But no, they're spreading these out so they can try to make money over time, so it looks nice on some fucking graph. It's not fun for me. But I talk about the collaborations to illustrate a point. I have absolutely no childhood or adolescent or even young adult linkage or vibe with any of these. I almost sounded like Christopher Walken. Vibe with any of these crossovers. These are brand new constructs for the most part, right? So beyond just wanting everything that has Motu on it or TMNT or whatever, what compulsion do I have to get these? Beyond the off chance I might find some of them cool. Like I said before, I revealed that the only Turtles crossover I bought was Shredder just so his knees would bend. It's the only reason. It's a very practical reason. None of these appeal to me, and a lot of people they don't appeal to. And I don't see why you would make this big of an investment into crossing over these properties if you didn't have more. It just seems like if you're going to take risks on things that people have expressed interest in, but you've in the past decided not to do it because there's a risk. Do you see what I'm saying? But I think that John Worldman Cardboard is on the right path. Hello, back to Paula. Hello. Good to see you. Worldman Cardboard following up again says, if they're going to make Motu Transformers, they should have made Motu vehicles transform. What was offered is proof it's just brand. I completely agree. So they're taking risks, but they're taking the least costly risks possible, and then seeing what the returns are like. But on the other hand, if they just look at all the money they've spent on these collabs, the advertisements, the trade shows, the tooling, all that shit, right? Take all that money and funnel it into stuff we've asked for, right? A good example of that is folks that collect Masterverse really want Masterverse scale vehicles and play sets. Now, I don't think you're going to get a ton of those, generally speaking. But I do think you could get a couple iconic ones. You probably would be able to get a Masterverse Castle Grayskull, probably get Masterverse Wind Raider, maybe. And then something on the evil side, it just depends. Take those kinds of risks, and I think it would make a lot of sense. On the other hand, though, you look at the Motu Thundercats crossover, right? Well, this is the most well-executed one because you can buy these and make a completely legit-looking Thundercat out of each and every one of these, taking off all the extraneous armor and stuff. And now you've got Thundercats in 5.5 for $20 or less, depending upon where you buy them. And I think that's great. I think that's the kind of risk we should be seeing. But we're not. It's kind of this other thing. World Cardboard wants to know what this is. This is a plush Pink Panther being tackle-hugged by a stuffed red panda that I got from the World Wildlife Federation. That was a Christmas gift for Lauren, our first year together. So the Pink Panther I got out of the claw machine from the arcade I worked at. I just opened it and grabbed it because fuck them. I wanted it. They were closing the entire company, and I just said, I want this. I didn't take a lot. I took that. But yeah, they should be taking risk on other things. And I knew Bill would bring this up, so I didn't want to say it out loud. But Bill says that if they want a collab that makes sense, they should do it with Motu and the DC Comics Warlord, or Remco. Bring in more of these third-party knockoffs, right? Like, so they brought Sunman in, and I love that. I really am really glad they did that. It was a pretty easy, no-brainer way of expanding the diversity of Motu, but still having something linked to the past. I don't think anybody was shit on as a result of that. And I think that it was great. People were complaining from the start, I want more of the vintage line. Well, now we've seen that two things that proves. One, they were keeping the vintage reproductions of Origins at a good, solid clip for quite a while, even though they were also doing Sunman. They completed the Sunman stuff, haven't pushed any new Sunman stuff. And since then, the vintage reproductions from Motu have trickled almost to a halt. Not quite, but close, and it's really shitty. Well, Bjorn asks why TMNT or Thundercats, why haven't they gotten the Origins treatment? Well, the Ninja Turtles have. They started it last year with these ultra posable. They call them the Reimagined, I think it is, and they're the ones that had extra posy stuff, but they had bumps all over them. This new 6-pack that's coming out is the same thing with corrections and revisions from what fans have said they didn't like about that first run of Turtles. Plus, you get Splinter and Shredder in that ultra posable thing. We've already seen prototypes of Bebop and Rocksteady. So Playmates is doing that already. As far as Thundercats getting the Origins treatment, that's literally what this crossover is. It's them doing it so that no one else has to. And you can make just a regular Thundercat out of each and every one of the figures on order. So it's already happened for the most part. So a collab between Galaxy Rangers and Saber Rider, I don't know that would actually happen. He says, I know it won't happen. Yeah, it's a question of, I don't think I have to say anything, but like Voltron and Power Rangers, like with the Zords, these kinds of things that are like sugar-driven fantasies of our younger selves don't really hold water when you think about them as toys or properties, and yet they're trying them anyway. Really upsets me. And JLS Comics, I didn't mean to skip over your saying hello. It's good to see you. Rollback Cardboard says, so no $300 Hot Toys Pighead? No, I don't think it's gonna happen. But Mondo, Mondo's been doing a lot of stuff, so you never know what Mondo's gonna do because they're fucking nuts. Mondo being kind of, among other things, like they're kind of the Hot Toys for Motu, because I don't think Hot Toys does Motu at this point. And if I was just into a certain toy line, I can kind of see that stuff on my shelf, but I can't do it. I can't. I gotta have a little bit of everything. I gotta have the buffet. I gotta have the variety pack, man. Gotta do it, right? I mean, I even modified my ideas for display in the new toy room, the Oregon toy room, because I'm anticipating Snake Lair. I was like, well, I'm going to need a little bit more space this way. I want to do some of this stuff. So I moved some idea stuff around, and it's not going to be horrifically more expensive. It's actually going to be maybe 20 more bucks to do it that way as opposed to something else I was thinking. But that's what happens. Toys come and you modify things, right? But I'm excited for the Snake Lair because it takes things that we had as a kid, lore we had as kids, and kind of makes it real. So it's a new thing based on old ideas. Just like I like a lot of the newer Snake Men stuff they did because it was like, oh, let's take this to the next level and do a little bit more. So I enjoy that stuff. I like new things that expand the old ideas. These crossovers don't do that. And I think that if more toy companies did that, or like more toy lines had that kind of flexibility lore wise, maybe we'd be in a different spot and less of these crossovers. Boba Hicks is here. Welcome to the stream. But I think that the collaborations are an example of, again, averse to risk taking. And I think that that's happening because they're trying to think, they're just throwing everything into the kitchen sink at this point. And I think that has to do, quite frankly, with the onset of middle age for the majority of the people that are into these properties. They know it's only so much time of these folks working, actively making money, wanting to spend dispensable income on things like toys. And they want to get all that last little bit of money out of us. And then they're going to rotate into the next possible property. All right. So, like, for example, Power Rangers would be the next, because it's kind of like the generational and a half move, right? Worldwide Cardboard about the Power Rangers says the Playmates Power Rangers are on the worst end cap at his Walmart. Back of the store, bad lighting, right next to the garden section. And they don't seem to be selling because no one can find them. Also, I'm getting a lot of really bad reports about the quality of these things. People coming off the Lightning collection from Hasbro just wanting a 6-inch Ranger. They don't necessarily want this revival of the toys that, even as a teenager, I was like, these are shit. Why would you want those? When I was a kid, I had one toy that had like the flip head thing that I thought was really cool, even though his head was a little bit too small. And that was the villain from Silverhawks, Monstar. And that was cool. It was a cool play feature. So you could have either or character. Solved a lot of problems in terms of, toys. But it wasn't something I was going after. Like, Spider-Man, Peter Parker, flip heads wouldn't have worked for me, and you go down the line. I don't want that shit, right? It's not for me. And I don't know why that Playmates is going to prioritize that. And they're like, it's aimed towards children. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. When's the last time you met a kid that wanted the original Power Rangers team in that form? That would get a kick out of that. Is it designed to get them hooked? Are they hoping that people like us that remember those toys and those Rangers will get a kid a set of these and then put them in front of the YouTube and watch the old, like, dude, that's a lot of convoluted things you have to do to get a child to want that toy and cherish that toy. Okay. So it's just further proof that they're throwing everything they can think of at us to get us to spend money while they can. Like next month is going to be kind of rough for pre-orders coming in for your boy. Because you got the Foot Cruiser, I think, comes out either end of September, early October. And then prior to that, the Sewer Layer comes out. And neither of these are the cheapest of cheap. There's certainly some other figures that are coming in. We've got to be careful. Getting close to the move and everything. We've got to be careful. Anything going to Big Bad is a non-issue because it can just stay there until we've got our new mailbox there in Oregon. But, these things change and stuff like that. But I feel like with the reissues of the Turtles, they've kind of hit that speed bump where they're going, well, we can redo the Technodrome, the snake layer, or pardon me, the sewer layer, and you know some hard to find vehicles, some fan favorites and stuff. And they went hard. They went for like the harder to find ones, in some, at least from my perspective. I almost never saw the sewer layer or the foot cruiser, certainly not the mutant module, anywhere when I was a kid. And to be able to have these in my collection is really important to me, right? So I think they're taking whoever's in charge of those gangbusters, but they know that toy line or that version of that toy line is coming to an end. And it's pretty smart marketing that there's like, okay, now we've corrected our issues with the origins style of the turtles, and now we're starting over again. And I gotta be honest, man, there are not too many characters that I give a fuck enough about to replace them in the posable territory. For me, it's going to be the Turtles, Splinter, Shredder, Bebop, Rocksteady, April, and that's pretty much it. You know, the main players, right? Everything else that I've already got, that's 5 POA, fine. Doesn't bother me. They've just got to sit there and look nice, right? But at this point, I have so many fucking turtles. You know, it's really hard to justify some of this stuff. Go Power Rangers, right to clearance. Yeah. John Worldmade of Cardboard says, I've been out of modern toy collecting for years now. I'm in my mid 50s, and I think that those of us who grew up in the 70s and 80s are growing out of collecting. And Bill says that he'll admit to slowing down, being nearly 55 himself, but he says he'll never grow out of collecting. And then the back and forth continues. John says, don't get me wrong, if there's something I like, I get it, but the Praetorian Fury was my latest toy purchase, and that's been since the DFW Joe show, but I want it. And I think that's what a lot of us say, but I want it. Jason Garcia's in the house. Nice to see you. I really do believe that once a collector, always a collector, because this doesn't just affect action figures. This affects physical media. This affects, whether that be music, movies, video games, pop vinyls, because those are starting. They just reported a pretty big loss. And for people that really love those things, that's got to be a bit of a blow. Like I don't like pops very much. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. One of them I got from a subscription service, and they had Doom as their thing. And I still have it in the box. It's a Space Marine. It's whatever. Another one is King from Tekken. It was a gift from friends. And I keep that on my video game shelf. And I got a Lemmy from the same friends because they know how big of a Motorhead fan I am. And so, like, one was a gimme, 2 were gifts, and the other 2 I bought myself at the same time. Everything else I've given away because they just kind of came to me or whatever, right? They're not for me. But there's a lot of things in this world. A lot of things in this world that are not for me. And something I think a lot of toy collectors don't want to admit or refuse to concede is that Funko's got a lot of people back into toys. Like it or not, at least got them going to the toy aisles. And maybe that's, switched a lot of people to more traditional toys and action figures. It certainly opened my eyes up to the possibility of collecting toys as an adult, because it just wasn't something that was in my circle at the time. Not a lot. But it happens, So those things are going away too. And they had seemed to show no sign of slowing down as a business. Looks like they're going to have to. And I like Jason Garcia's point of view here. He says, I want to keep collecting, but damn, I'm being priced out, and there's also no space. Bjorn, who's, if you don't mind me saying so, significantly younger than a lot of us, even he is being slowed down in collecting because it's not bringing The same joy that it used to. You should look up burnout. There's actual mental health, different types of burnout, but you just might be burned out, dude, because that's a sign of something. Granted, you don't have to collect. If everything else in your life is bringing you joy and collecting is not, obviously stop. But if something you love is not bringing you joy and you're just kind of otherwise, look it up. Trust me on this. But as Bill is pointing out here, there's lots of other stuff out there. If you want to go out of your way to collect, you can. You absolutely can. Because he's saying that, he collects vintage lines. Fisher Price Adventure people versus like modern stuff has to have a vintage vibe, like the Mode 2 Origins or Superpowers, Legends of Dragonor, which he just did a great live stream on. You should go check it out. And as he says almost every stream, Bill says Kojitron collects healthier than me. Kojitron collects better than most people because he rotates stuff out. He's what I call a catch and release collector. And that's really smart. I'm not that guy. Are there things in my collection I'll eventually let go of? Yes. For example, once that 6-pack comes in of Playmates, which I haven't ordered yet, it seems like it's not selling out anytime soon. But when I get that, if I get that, but if I do, when it comes, the original pimply faced turtles, that have the origins kind of posing, like they're going to go in a box until I'm ready to sell them. And I know I'm not going to get much for them. I don't care. I just don't need them anymore because I will have had this other stuff. And I have some other things that probably could go for sure. But for me, it really comes down to I'm in this unique space where I went from very small living to small-ish living here, made it work as long as I could. The display is just not happening now because we got to pack. And then what we're moving to has a much larger space for display. And it is solely for that purpose for the most part. And then the forever home, as we affectionately refer to as the 5-ever home, if we have our way, is going to be much bigger of a display space. And it's going to be something where I can spread them out, display them the way I always imagined that I could do it. More dioramas than static display of figures, for sure. And for me, that's a childhood dream. It's what I want to achieve. But there's a finite number of toys I want. And to come back to the original point of this show is that I think that the toy makers know that. They know that everyone's got an end game in mind. And whether that's a financial reason, a nostalgic reason, or something more practical, right? They're running out of customers, basically. People are slowing down collecting, stopping collecting altogether, reversing their collections, just selling them off, whatever. Even some of those dedicated collectors that I've ever seen, I'm seeing them turn around and sell a bunch of stuff just to make room for where they're moving and stuff like that, which is weird. John says, price of these toys is just overwhelming. Only have one vintage toy related item I want, and I'm done on vintage too. Fair enough. My wife is here. Says, happy Monday, everyone. It's not a good impression of her, to be honest, but she has a soft voice. She has a very nice, warm voice. I just can't do a very good impression of her. Sorry. It's okay. I'll put it to you as succinctly as I can because I've been beating around this bush. People who are the target audience for the kind of toys we typically talk about on this show are of the age where they're retiring, going on fixed incomes, and can't afford toys anymore, or are soon going to be in that age range. Another percentage of them are dying off because of unnatural causes, meaning certain, the certain kinds of terminal illnesses are catching people, stuff like that. And then, of course, we're only a few short decades away from that just completely. The whole generation is going to be gone within 40 years. And that's being conservative, okay, for the most part. So these corporations, especially given the fact they're publicly traded, given the fact that these people are looking at their brands and they're not looking at the products so much, they're looking at ways to prolong the brands. And so they're trying to soak up as much money as they can from us while they figure out their next move. And then they're going to move on from us. Okay. They're going to move on from us like a gold digging playmate bunny after the doddering old man dies, right? They're going to take the paycheck, run to the next well. All right. It starts with things like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and eventually goes to full-blown 90s stuff for millennials. And eventually makes its way to things that come out in the early 2000s. Like you're going to see a Bratz redo. You're going to see, like you already see a lot of trading card games going, shit like that. It's going to happen. And I think on a long enough timeline, what's going to happen is that some of these modern toy lines we're seeing now, like the stuff we're collecting right now, there's a small percentage of kids that are buying them or buying them alongside their dads and moms. Maybe they'll go full circle and see a revival of revivals down the road. But they also realize that the age of the toy is slowly going away, which is that's a hard one. I can handle my own mortality. I can handle that nostalgia is not always going to be for the stuff that I grew up on. But the idea that future generations aren't going to have the same kind of joy that I had around the types of things that I had, that is really scary to me. We've already seen it with the death of the video store, the death of the traditional music store, where kids don't discover movies, films, and music the way that we did. It's not saying that the streaming stuff isn't convenient or that shouldn't exist. But there's the adventure and the social aspect of it is gone. Fuck social media. Fuck the algorithms. Fuck ads. We didn't have any of that shit growing up. You had to rely on the taste of others, whether it be reading reviews or taking a chance on just cover artwork alone, be it a movie or music or whatever, to do this. And people aren't getting those experiences. They're being deprived of the fun of that. And I think the same is true with toys. The same is true with a lot of things. So this is where what Bill has been begging for since the beginning of the show comes. This isn't just about toy companies moving on to the next generation. It's about an entire perspective and way of life being erased off the planet forever. Forever. I want you to consider for a second, and don't worry, I'm going to take you to Mordor. I'll bring you right back to the Shire. Just stay with me. The entire concept of being into something as a kid because you saw a show and then went to the store and had to scour the shelves to find something and then fell in love with that physical object As a child, it might be a stuffed animal, and then as you grow a little bit older, it might be an action figure. And then when you got a little bit older, it might be a cassette tape or a compact disc, a VHS tape, Betamax, laser disc, DVD, Blu-ray, game cartridge, CD-ROM, DVD-ROM, Blu-ray-ROM, and so forth. All of that. In our lifetimes will go away. They're not going to make these things new anymore. They're going away. And there will be entire generations of people, more than one generation, don't even have an opportunity, not even a chance at something even remotely approaching that experience. They're going to be swallowed up by these digital algorithms, these advertising pumping, misinformation mongering, money grubbing, controlling fuckwits. And all they're going to be in love with is themselves and how much clout they can get. So it's up to us to enjoy ourselves as much as we can, to espouse the joy as much as we can. We don't have to make people be into the things we're into, but we need to do what we can to inspire others to seek genuine joy, genuine happiness in the physical world. For me, having this at my fingertips makes me really fucking happy, because for over 15 years of my life, the idea of being able to reach out and grab a physical copy of this was an impossibility. There was no way. Now I have like 7, 8, 9 copies of the goddamn thing because I never want to be without it. Same goes for toys. That brings me that kind of joy. Now, because the physical, it's good that people being born now and children being brought up in adolescence, I like that they're not tethered to physical things as much. Generally speaking, I'm talking about the acquisition of things. They're more looking after experiences. So the only thing we really have to do is foster the joy of the human experience, right? Because I think if there's anything that our generation should embody, it's the joy of memories and experience. For our generation, there's a lot of memories associated around these physical objects. Sometimes there's experiences that associate with those things. Sometimes it's the things themselves. I don't love my Skeletor figures because I love Skeletor as a character so much. I do. But it's because I have the memory of my grandmother taking me to the store in such a way that it felt like we were cheating on my parents in a weird sort of way to get my first Skeletor. I can see it clear as day. And I miss perceiving toy shelves in a store being that tall, feeling like they went on forever. I miss that. So having these figures and having them in such a display that reminds me of the stores that's my thing. That's what I want. I want to capture that in a nice bubble for myself. And it's my job to inspire that kind of joy in other people. Because I have it now, I can pass it on. I can share it. They don't have to share it because of the toy or the thing. They just see it, the joy, and they want that joy for themselves, right? I think that ultimately is what we should be after. We talk a lot about the toy industry and wanting people to enjoy these things. The fact of the matter is that they're never going to have those cartoons again in the same way that we had them. It's just not going to happen. Things don't catch on that way anymore. They're not going to have the toys the way that we had them. They don't make toys like that in a way that makes kids compelled to want them and that all the kids in their neighborhood will want them. That's not a shared experience anymore. So what we have to do is say, we have to accept it's not going to be the same anymore. So if it's not going to be the same, we need to look at what the result of these things are. What it is that the thing that we can all agree is good about this stuff is the joy that it gives us. Try to spread that and aspire others to create that level of joy with whatever it is that they most have either a nostalgic attachment to or an experiential attachment to. And just so that the kind of fanatical happiness that we tend to get, that dopamine hit that only drug addicts understand, that somehow lives on in whatever way is appropriate to those future generations. Okay. Hasbro and Mattel aren't going to live much longer past us. So that keeps me quite cozy at night. And it's kind of like like when you're on borrowed time kind of a thing. Like the toy companies know they're on borrowed time too, I think. The current CEOs of stuff seem to think, oh, we're going to be media companies. We're going to go beyond bullshit. No, you're going to get just pieced away. What's going to happen is someday, 80 years down the line, some punk kid entrepreneur is going to buy this little property called He-Man and go, I wonder what I can do with this. And they're going to, another kid's going to get G.I. Joe. And they're going to make whatever it is that's popular in the day and reimagine these properties in a way that inspires others down the road. We're not going to be able to see that, and that sucks, but it's like this is a whole civilization's worth of way of thought that's going to go away. And I look at my parents' generation, I look at their parents' generation, and I see those changes as being much more gradual, okay, throughout each of those generations. But I think that from Gen X and millennials going forward, it's a lot more abrupt. The way we live has changed exponentially, and we have to be okay with that. I would love to clutch my proverbial pearls and hang on to these things, but it's just not going to happen. It's not. It doesn't matter how many times I shake a really cool toy at a 5-year-old kid. They're either going to like them or not. So maybe the answer is to stop trying to force what gave us joy onto others and instead shared that joy with them. That's what I came here to say today. So I'm going to catch back on chat there. So sorry, very sorry that I went there. But the fact of the matter is that we have to remember the happiness, the joy of these things. Because if everyone that is watching this show right now, if we all decided to stop collecting, the stuff we have would still be pretty happiness fulfillment. We'd have each other, right? So the important part is the happiness. It really is. Let's see. I'm trying to come back to where I left off. Okay. So John says, when we bought our house, I told my wife, that's it, no more moving. If we should have to move, I might just burn it all because I hate packing. Us too. That's why we're paying a ridiculous amount of money to have someone else pack, because I'm done. I'm packing the toys just because I don't trust anyone else to pack them. Not that I don't trust them to pack them, I don't trust them to pack them in a way that'll keep it organized enough for me. So that's a thing. Bjorn says, Lauren's here. Finally, some class. Okay, Ozzy's here. Hi. World My Carver says, for me, I'm just done. I don't see any other toy that is a definite must buy. Fair enough. And I think we're all going to get to that point eventually. Johnny Sorensen says, if I'm moving again, it's in a box. Fuck moving. I agree. Okay. Bjorn hitting the nail on the head right as I started talking about this, but he says we may be one of the last generations of toy collectors. I believe so. I really believe that. That doesn't mean I'm happy about that, but I think it's a realistic thing we have to look at. World by Cardboard says, my daughters both have some toys. My oldest has a few action figures. My youngest has several Godzilla toys. Still, it's nothing like a whole toy line, just a few toys they like. And you know something? I think that's part of like the phasing out of the hobby is going to become. You guys are going to think I'm silly here, but I do feel like almost every family that has a collector in it, there's going to be a handful, and I'm talking less than 10 items that become legitimate family heirlooms because it meant so much to great grandpa or whatever, right? I think it's about as close as we're going to get to passing the hobby down. I think that's going to happen. You know, for me, it would probably be my Unicron if I had to guess. That's easy to literally pass down, right? But that's just my guess. Who knows? I've got 30, 40, Godzilla willing 50 more years of collecting in me. Who knows what will make its way into the room, right? And I'm seeing some agreements in chat. Bill getting a little sad there. I apologize. Being Long saying that kids don't know what music cassettes are, etc. Some do, some don't. Johnny Sorensen says, kids don't know the sound of accidentally putting a C64, a Commodore 64 cassette in your stereo and having your ears bleed. Whew, that's rough. Warbin of Cardboard says, one day there will only be one Star Wars figure left in the world, and it won't be Luke Skywalker. As Michael French said, it will be the Imperial Dignitary. Ooh, ouch. That's an ouchy one. Joe DeBecky, glad you're here, says, big fan of experiencing physical joy from way back. There you go. Exactly. And there's a few ways one can look at that. But I have to say, it's a big one. You have that experiential, you know, you have to have that physical thing. One of the things that, like right now in life, that I look forward to the most is watching something new with my wife. And right now, the way that we get that is WWE and the Challenge and Big Brother. Those three entities, it's something new that we both have never seen before, new episodes, right? And WWE is live. Some episodes of Big Brother are live. And the Challenge is, you know, it's pre-recorded, but it's a whole thing, right? And for us, you know, we enjoy the show, sure. But I don't want to speak for her. But for me, it's the experience of watching it with her. Because when I try to watch any of those things by myself, I turn them off in 5 minutes. Because it's the back and forth of watching these things and discussing character arcs and storylines and oh shit, you know, those things are important. They're just as important as anything else. And you know, a good meal is a good meal, sure. A good date is a good date. And I'm always going to cherish those things and try to create those experiences within our relationship and everything. But knowing on a day-to-day basis, we're going to create memories every single day. That's awesome to me. You know, I gravitate to all these physical things because they remind me of great memories from my childhood. But this phase of my life has become about making more memories right away. I love that. I think the more people chase that, the better off they're going to be. Johnny Sorensen says that there is a Japanese dub with full English subtitles of the Transformers '86 movie on YouTube. Watching it today. Hi. That's all I have to say about that. Worldman Cardboard says that there's an Instagram reel from this summer that shows a group of kids in a suburb that set up a ramp in the street where jumping their bicycles. Well, there's a ton of hope. There's lots and lots of kids that bike and skateboard. A lot more than you'd think. The reason I know this is because one of the other things my wife and I love to do is watch kids fucking eat shit trying to do those things. So those are still very much a thing, and there's lots of people from our generation keeping those activities alive. I think those will live much longer than the concept of toys and things. I really believe that. Stephen S. says that we'll watch future generations as ghosts. I mean, sure, it's a possibility. Johnny Sorensen says all the toy companies have failed for 30 years to be, quote, media companies, and that always falls back to physical products, pie in the sky, money grabbing bullshit. Yeah, that's nothing new. But that's kind of they're trying to recreate the late 70s and the 80s and the early 90s, and you just can't. There's more to it than just what you made and how you presented it, right? Culture around you's changed, the economy's changed, all that stuff. It's impossible to like recreate that. Because if you could take the awesomeness that was insert your childhood here, in my case, it would be like I could walk into any store and just get He-Man shit with impunity for $2 a figure. Castle Grayskull's flying off the shelves, $20. Snake Mountain, $30 coming at you, like that would be a thing. And I would be so happy. And like the most popular cartoon on TV would be like, Motu. It doesn't work that way. You can't do that. And I think as soon as you accept that, life becomes a lot easier, in my opinion. Johnny Sorensen, these days are your and mine. Grindhead days. I can't do the happy days thing. Happy days. Bjorn says, I work in a secondhand toy store. Sure, I see children in here, but it's a lot mostly adults. Well, yeah. Give it time. You'll see those kids growing up as adults coming in when you're carrying toys from their generation. Stephen S. says, just look at the second generation video game console collectors. We have maybe 20-some years left. So much lost interest in those now. The NES is the earliest still holding on. Yeah. You still see a lot of Atari stuff because the people that are dealers of that are less, they're not hanging on to it as tightly because they know the value's going down. So you'll get good deals on stuff. It's kind of like after the crash. It's the second-hand market crash. Hang on, I gotta get something to drink here. Much better. But I'm totally with you on this. It's happening. It's happening before our very eyes. But I'm going to get myself a good Atari nut before it dies. That's for sure. Johnny Sorensen says, Billy, this was Grandpa's unique state of the bass player from Metallica. We don't know why he was wearing yellow or so oily, but Grandpa seemed to muscle men a whole lot. I don't even know what that means. Oh, the statue. Okay. I'm not even going to let's go back over that. Bjorn's like, I understood that reference. There you go. Now we're getting real. John says that his daughters will probably fight over his Shogun Warriors Godzilla. As they should. Let them fight. That's what I say. Joe DeBecky says, just think how exciting it was to go to a toy store when you were a kid. Speaking for myself, I haven't changed in that regard. Me either. It's just fantastic. Billy Wiftis says he figures after he dies that his toys will go to landfill. No, not if I know your kid. Most of that stuff's going to end up right in at least in her house for a while. I don't think there's a lot of stuff she's going to want to keep. Trust me on that one. Trust me. But even then, I mean, okay, spoiler alert. Everything that we cherish will eventually end up in a landfill, burnt or crushed. That's just the nature of material. Okay. That's just how it is. Right. But I think that there, as long as you are surrounded by people who sincerely care for you, your spirit lives on. And in turn, some of this physical stuff, of course, too. I like to think, at least, even if it's for bottom dollar, some of my stuff can get sold off to buy a kick-ass vacation or a down payment on something someone really wants. I think that'd be cool. But I don't have to worry about that right now. I'm alive. I'm happy. I've got relatively good health. I have a wife that I love and that loves me. I've got a wonderful pair of pets. We're going to be getting more pets. I ain't worried about this shit. I'm talking about it, but I'm not worried about it. I'm good. Johnny Sorensen is putting up his house to be the new landfill after he dies. There you go. Good stuff. So World Made of Cardboard says, I think my youngest would win. She was in the Marine Corps, the Corps at A&M. Navy scares you sometimes. She'd be fun to talk to, that's for sure. But yeah, so I have to bring this one up. Billy's like, well, yes, the second law of thermodynamics. Yes, exactly. That for me, that's the bottom line, and not just because The Rock said so. I think there are many of us within the toy collecting hobby, and certainly with physical media as well, that are constantly just like trying to protect the memory of our childhoods to the point where we look at the modern purveyors that are making products that are meant to trigger that nostalgia, and we're trying to hold them accountable for not having a perfect nostalgia trigger, or not treating us the way we wanted to be treated, as custodians of these memories, right? I think we take it all too seriously sometimes. Sometimes there's good reasons to be mad. I mean, more often than often, I'd like to discuss. But at the end of the day, if the memory is the thing, just create good memories. Do what you can. If you've been collecting for a few years, I bet you've got some. If you're just starting out, there's ways to do it. If you're not sure, ask one of us. We'll help you out. But make memories. I love you guys. I'll see you next week. Cheers.